26 years ago, on a May afternoon filled with the scent of gasoline and metal clinging to my clothes, I walked out of the mechanic shop with rough, cracked hands. In my pocket, I clasped the last paycheck needed to buy the engagement ring for Karina. I vividly recall that moment, full of hope and anticipation for the proposal I planned for the following month. At the time, I was a 20-year-old named Ludus, working tirelessly as a mechanic, living with my parents and my older brother Raul, and deeply in love with my high school sweetheart. Raul and I were close despite our contrasting strengths. He was the intellectual one, while I excelled at fixing things with my hands. When I excitedly shared my engagement plans with him, he offered me a congratulatory pat on the back. He told me, "You're going to make that girl happy, brother," and I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was not only my brother, but also my best friend and confidant. Karina and I had been together for 3 years. She had luscious black hair flowing down to her waist, eyes like honey, and a laughter that could make any worries disappear. As we strolled through the park, we dreamed of our future together. A cozy home with a spacious garden. I should tell her, right? She would ask, and I would nod in agreement. That sunny afternoon in May, I decided to surprise her. My boss allowed me to leave work early as a token of appreciation for the extra hours I had put in that week. I picked up a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite flowers, and made my way to her house. I had a key, as her family had warmly welcomed me into their home. As I entered the house, the familiar quietness greeted me. Her parents often worked late on Thursdays, a routine I was accustomed to. Curious laughter caught my attention as I approached her room, the door slightly ajar. Peeking inside, I saw a scene that tore me apart in a way that time has not fully healed. Karina sat on the bed, wearing only a t-shirt, my favorite t-shirt. For our anniversary, I had surprised her with a bouquet of sunflowers. However, my heart sank as I discovered my brother Raul standing shirtless with his hand on her thigh beside her. The sunflowers slipped from my grip, crashing to the floor and startling the two of them. "Louise, it's not what you think," Karina exclaimed, hastily covering herself with a sheet as if it could somehow erase the scene before me. Raul quickly got to his feet, pleading, "Brother, please let us explain. It's not what you think." The words "it's not what you think" hit me like a cruel blow, as if my eyes were wrong or there was some other explanation for this betrayal unfolding before me. My voice barely above a whisper, I managed to ask, "How long?" My throat felt dry and my fists were clenched, knuckles turning white. They exchanged a glance, each look feeling like another betrayal. "3 months, Raul confessed, avoiding my gaze, "but we never meant to hurt you. It just happened. It just happened." The words stung like a sharp blade, as if it was all just a random accident, like an unexpected storm. In that moment, my anger erupted like a volcano. That I did not even recognize myself. I yelled until I was hoarse. So I threw things against the wall. I told them I hated them, that I would never forgive them. "I was saving to buy you a ring." I yelled at her, "And you knew?" I yelled at him, reminding him of all the times he had listened to me talk about my plans, how much I loved Karina, our future together. I left there shaking with rage and pain. I drove aimlessly until I had to stop because the tears would not let me see. I called my mother that night to tell her what had happened. "Son, brothers always fight," was her reply. As disappointing as it was surprising, I'm sure it is not as bad as it seems. But it was bad. It was a betrayal that broke me in two. The following weeks were chaos. I moved out of the room I shared with Raul at my parents' house. I rented a small apartment near the shop. I changed my phone number. My family tried to mediate. My father, a man of few words, just said, "Time heals all." My aunts continued to invite Raul to family gatherings. Life moved on as if nothing had happened. I had distanced myself and made it clear where I stood. 2 months later, my cousin Laura informed me that Karina was expecting Raul's child. Inevitably, they tied the knot 6 months later. While my family attended the wedding, I was not invited, a decision my mother defended as supporting my brother during a significant moment. I refused to speak to her for 3 weeks. Nevertheless, time marched on. In a bid to clear my mind, I joined a dance class at the insistence of a friend, where I met Mariana. A pediatrician with a warm smile and a strong personality, she broke through my barriers effortlessly. Unlike Karina, Mariana was a breath of fresh air, and that's why I fell head over heels for her. We married a year later, and 9 months after that, we welcomed Daniela, our beloved daughter. Despite the joy I found, the pain never fully subsided. I maintained my distance from Raul and Karina, never speaking to them again. When our paths crossed at events like funerals or family weddings, I kept my distance, content in my own happiness. In that room, my family came to understand that I had set a boundary. While I was willing to maintain a relationship with them, I would never participate in the same activities. Despite Mariana's attempts to persuade me to forgive for my own peace of mind, there are betrayals that leave such a deep impact that forgiveness feels unattainable. Even when Mariana and I eventually divorced a decade later due to different reasons, simply falling out of love with each other, the thought of reconciling with my brother never crossed my mind. I believe that some doors remained closed forever until recently. During a meeting at our usual cafe, my 24-year-old daughter Daniela stunned me by expressing her desire to meet her Uncle Raul and Karina. The weight of her words lingered in the air as my coffee cup hovered midway between the table and my lips. I searched her eyes for a hint of jest, but found none. "What are you referring to?" I inquired after what seemed like a long pause. Daniela responded as though she had been preparing for this conversation for a significant amount of time. "I have been following them on social media for years now," I continued. "My cousin Renata and I established a bond while I was in college. Renata, my niece and the daughter of Raul and Karina, was a reminder of a past betrayal. How did you manage to get in touch with them?" I questioned, attempting to keep my composure. "Grandma showed me photos of her when I was 15, which piqued my curiosity to look her up on Facebook," Daniela explained. Despite my mother's acceptance of my decision not to communicate with Raul, she made sure to keep Daniela informed about that part of the family, saying children are not at fault, as she often did. Suddenly, suspicion crept into the conversation as Daniela inquired, "This isn't related to your wedding, is it?" Daniela, who was set to marry Miguel, an IT professional, in 3 months, lowered her gaze, confirming my worries. "I would like them to attend my wedding," she finally revealed. "I want Uncle Raul, Karina, and my cousins there. I want the whole family to be together," my daughter said, her words causing a mix of emotions to flood through me. My stomach churned, and a cold sweat ran down my back as I realized she was asking for something that seemed impossible. After 26 years of avoiding them, my daughter now wanted us to come together on her special day. "I can't do that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as memories flooded my mind. "Do you even know what they did to me, Daniela? It's not that simple to just forget and move on." But Daniela's eyes pleaded with me, her voice rising as she spoke. "It's been 26 years, Dad. Can't we put the past behind us just for one day?" I could feel anger rising within me as I struggled to contain my emotions. "You don't understand. It's not that easy to just let go of the past." "But what about what I'm asking you?" She pushed back, her determination clear. "It's my wedding, Dad, and I want my whole family there." The weight of her words hung in the air, the tension palpable as we both realized the gravity of the situation. "Come to the event." You shouted out without a second thought that they are not your family. "You didn't let them into your life, that's why they haven't been there," she yelled, slamming her hand on the table. "Do you realize how many birthdays and Christmases I miss spending with my cousins because of your pride?" Her words struck me like a blow. In this narrative, I was the antagonist. Standing up, I tried to steady my shaking hands. "If you want to invite them, go ahead," I said icily. "But don't expect me to be present if they come." My daughter's expression changed from frustration to surprise and then disbelief. "Are you saying you won't attend my wedding because of a disagreement you had when you were 20? She asked, her voice trembling. "It wasn't just a disagreement, Daniela. I was betrayed by the two people I trusted the most in the world." "And what about trusting me?" She fired back. "What about what I want?" We locked eyes in silence for a moment. I could see a familiar resolve in her gaze, inherited from— "I don't just want them to attend," she said, remaining calm but firm. "I want Renata to be one of my bridesmaids." That was the final straw. It was one thing to endure their presence for a day, but having the daughter of betrayal actively involved in the wedding was too much to bear. "If that's what you want, you'll have to proceed without my support," I stated firmly. I refuse to fund a wedding that celebrates what tore us apart. Daniela paled at my words. We had previously agreed that I would cover most of the wedding expenses, which was a significant commitment on my part, considering I wasn't wealthy. As a mechanic with my small shop, every penny counted. "Are you trying to blackmail me?" Daniela asked, incredulous. "I'm not blackmailing you. I'm simply setting my boundaries," I responded. "The choice is yours." She stood up abruptly, grabbed her purse, and fixed me with a look of disappointment and anger that I had never before witnessed. "Fine, if that's what you want. I'll go ahead without you. I don't need you." I watched as she walked away, struggling to hold back a flood of emotions. The struggle to chase after her left me questioning if I was making the right decision or if I was allowing the past to dictate my future. The days that followed were torturous. Danielle had ignored my calls, and my ex-wife Mariana called me in a fit of rage, accusing me of betraying our daughter. "How could you do this to her?" Mariana scolded me. "Do you even realize how much she's been suffering? You're pushing her to make an impossible choice." Feeling defensive, I retorted, "She's the one putting me in this position." Mariana was relentless, urging me to mature and let go of the past that spanned more than 2 decades. The floodgates opened as the news seemed to spread, with messages and calls pouring in from all directions. Even my usually reserved father intervened, advising me to set aside my ego and prioritize my daughter's happiness. Amidst the turmoil, the only source of support I found was in Clara, my current partner. Despite being together for 3 years and valuing our independence by living in separate homes, Clara stood by me through it all. A literature teacher with a gentle spirit, she brought a sense of comfort and understanding to the chaos unfolding around me. But practical. "Everyone tells you what you should feel," she said one night while we were having dinner at my place. "But no one can dictate your emotions. Only you know how deep that pain was." Her words comforted me, but I still felt like I was losing my daughter. After 2 weeks without communication, I decided to call Miguel, her fiancé. He had always been respectful to me, and I thought he could help mediate. "Daniela is very hurt," he said, "but she is going ahead with the plans. Her friends are helping her financially, and her mother will also contribute something." The idea that my daughter had to borrow money for her wedding because I refused to pay gnawed at me. But every time I considered giving in, I remembered the image of Raul and Karina together, and the pain returned as if it were yesterday. One afternoon, when I came back from work, I found Daniela's car parked in front of my house. My heart skipped a beat. Had she come to reconcile? I entered with a mixture of hope and nervousness. What I found in the living room sent shivers down my spine as I entered. Seated on the couch were Daniela, Raul, and Karina. My brother looked noticeably older, with his once jet black hair now mostly gray. Despite the wrinkles around her eyes, Karina still exuded a beauty that made me uneasy. "What is this?" I demanded, feeling anger simmering within me. "Dad, please," Daniela interjected, rising from her seat. "Just hear them out. They'd come to talk to you." Raul stood up, cautiously approaching me. "Louise, I know I have no right to be here." "No, you don't," I interjected sharply, gesturing towards the door. "Get out of my house immediately." "Dad, please," Daniela implored. "I can't believe you've done this," I said, my voice cracking. "An ambush in my own home." "It's not an ambush," Karina interjected calmly. "We just want to make things right for Daniela, for the family." "Family," I repeated bitterly. "You shattered that a long time ago." The tension in the room was palpable, so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. Raul attempted to speak once more, but I silenced him by raising my hand. "You have 1 minute to leave my house before I call the police," I stated coldly, surprising myself with the harshness in my tone. "You are impossible," Daniela shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. All you care about is yourself, your pain, your pride. Karina guided Raul to the door, and as he glanced back at me, his expression was unreadable. Perhaps regret, maybe pity. "I'm sorry, brother," he whispered before departing. None of us wanted things to end this way. After they left, Daniela stood trembling with anger in the middle of a living room. "You've destroyed everything," she accused me. "I used to think you were the victim, but now I see you're just a bitter man clinging to the past." Her words cut through me like blades. "You've made your choice," I responded, attempting to keep my composure. "I trust you're happy with it." "I will be," she said, making her way to the door. "They'll be at my wedding. And you? That's up to you." With that, the door slammed shut, the sound resonating throughout the empty house. As I sat there alone, my legs trembling and a long-forgotten pain gripping my chest, I settled onto the couch where my brother and former love had just occupied. The thought loomed over me: was I truly willing to sacrifice my relationship with my daughter by avoiding confronting the ghost of my past? This question haunted me throughout the night, causing restless tossing and turning as I struggled to find peace. In the days that followed, I moved through life like a robot, mechanically tending to my work at the shop and returning home without engaging with anyone. Clara, noticing my detached demeanor, reached out to me in concern, but even with her, I found it difficult to articulate my inner turmoil. How could I convey the inner conflict I was battling, torn between past pain and the fear of losing my daughter? "Perhaps Daniela needs this," Clara mentioned one evening as we sat listlessly watching TV. This idea struck a chord within me. I had structured my existence around avoiding a painful part of my history, while Daniela had grown up with an emotional void and unanswered questions. Ions containing hidden photographs that my mother used to show secretly. Perhaps this gathering held a different significance for her. I decided to give in. I confided in Clara that I couldn't risk losing Daniela over this. That same evening, I mentally prepared myself to reach out to her. I practiced what I would say, how I would communicate my acceptance of her desire to include Raul and his family, despite my reservations. I even convinced myself that I could tolerate seeing Renetta as a bridesmaid. Just as I was about to dial her number, my phone rang. It was Roberto, an old friend who had worked alongside my father prior to his retirement. We hadn't spoken in months. "Louis, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I think you should be aware of something regarding Raul," he cautiously began. My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" I inquired. Roberto went on to explain that he had recently bumped into our cousin Eduardo, who shared that Raul's motive for reconciliation was influenced by his son Pablo's upcoming wedding. It appeared that various family members were contemplating something regarding. "Due to what he did to you years ago, I froze when he asked you to attend. Raul requires a positive public gesture from you to improve his image and ensure the success of his upcoming event." Eduardo overheard an argument between Raul and Karina regarding this matter, and the truth hit me suddenly. There was no remorse in my brother's eyes, only strategy. "Is this really necessary?" I hesitantly inquired, although I already knew the answer deep down. Eduardo, who was seated at a nearby table during their conversation at the restaurant, clearly heard Raul say, "If Luis forgives me at Daniela's wedding, everyone will attend Pablo's." After expressing my gratitude to Roberto for the information, I ended the call. Initial anger dissipated into an unsettling calm. Suddenly, everything became clear to me after weeks of confusion. It was not just about my wounded pride or inability to forgive. It was about manipulation and feeling used once more. Without hesitation, I reached out to Daniela, stating that I needed to have an important discussion. Surprisingly, she responded promptly, "Tomorrow, at the cafe at 10:00 a.m. I found myself restless after a sleepless night, going over in my mind how to address the situation with Daniela without seeming defensive. Determined to be straightforward, I resolved to stick to the truth. Meeting Daniela the next day, I noticed her fatigue mirrored my own. Dark circles underscored her eyes, and her usual vivacity was absent. It weighed heavily on me to see that I had contributed to her exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," I began as we sat down with our coffees. "What did you want to talk about?" she asked directly. Taking a deep breath, I started. "Last night, Roberto called me, your grandfather's friend, and he shared something important that I believe you should know before making any decisions regarding your wedding." Sharing the details of the conversation, I tried to maintain a neutral tone. As I narrated, I observed Daniela's expression shift from skepticism to surprise and ultimately to anger. "Are you certain?" she queried once I had finished, echoing the same doubt I had harbored the night before. "Reason for creating this fiction?" I responded, "It now makes sense after all these years. Why just before your wedding?" Daniela stayed quiet, processing the revelation. Eventually, she took out her phone and began typing. "What are you doing?" I inquired. "Sending a message to Renata," she answered without looking up. "I want to confirm if it's true." We sat in silence, the coffee growing cold between us. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Daniela read the message, her eyes welling up with tears. "It's true," she whispered. "Renata mentioned that her brother Pablo is getting married in December, with family attendance issues and her father trying to resolve them." For the first time in weeks, I reached across the table and held Daniela's hand. She didn't pull away. "I'm sorry, dear," I said sincerely. "I know how much he wished for us all to come together." "He deceived me," she murmured, wiping away a tear. "He led me to believe he genuinely wanted to meet me and cared about our relationship." "He does care." I attempted to comfort her, unexpectedly defending Raul in the process, but his motivations for reconciling with me were different. Daniela gripped my hand, meeting my gaze head-on. "Dad, I'm sorry. Your suspicions were justified. I put you in a terrible position." The relief I experienced was overwhelming, yet I couldn't shake the sadness from witnessing my daughter's disappointment. "It's all right, sweetheart. You're young and your ability to see the good in people is admirable," I reassured her. With a newfound determination, she declared, "I've made a decision. I don't want them at my wedding. Neither him, Karina, nor their children." "Are you certain?" "I don't want you to act rashly out of anger," I cautioned. "I'm sure. My wedding is about celebrating love, not fixing someone's reputation," she affirmed, sitting up tall. Later that day, Daniela shared a post on her Instagram account. Although she didn't directly reference Raul or the specific events, she made it known she had uncovered a truth regarding an act of family manipulation, and she had made the decision to only surround herself with authentic people on her special day. The announcement spread quickly among family and close friends, sparking a flurry of comments. My mother called, initially confused but ultimately supportive of Daniela's choice after learning the full story. Cousins who had previously pressured me to mature now sent apologetic messages. Unexpectedly, my father reached out, expressing skepticism with his usual brevity. Raul, known for not showing genuine remorse, called, adding to the confusion. However, in the following days, a sense of peace settled in, allowing me to refocus on wedding planning. I reassured Daniela that I would cover all the expenses as planned, relieving a significant burden. Despite Raul's efforts to explain himself in a lengthy message, I chose not to respond, feeling that words were unnecessary. On the day of Daniela's wedding, the weather was sunny and warm, almost as if nature itself was joining in the celebration. During our reconciliation, as we waited in the vestibule of the church, my daughter, radiant in her white dress, took my hands. "Thank you for being here, Dad," she said, "for not giving up on me, even when I almost gave up on you." Tears threatened to ruin my suit. "You were the best thing I have ever done in my life," I replied. "Nothing and no one could keep me away from this moment." When the music started playing and we walked down the aisle together, I felt a mix of pride and nostalgia. I would give my little girl away to a good man who loved her. Life went on with its ups and downs, its betrayals, and its moments of redemption. I looked at the smiling faces on both sides of the aisle. True family, loyal friends, people who had been there through thick and thin. The absence of Raul and Karina did not feel like a void, but like confirmation that sometimes keeping your distance is the right decision. The ceremony was beautiful, the party even more so. There were tears, laughter, dancing, and delicious food. At one point during the In the evening, as Daniela twirled on the dance floor with her new husband, Clara approached me with a curious look. "What's on your mind?" she inquired, her fingers intertwining with mine. "Some wounds never fully heal," I replied honestly, "but we learn to live with them, and sometimes they lead us to better places." Weeks later, news of Pablo's disastrous wedding, Raul's son, reached us. Many relatives had opted not to attend, not due to the old saga involving me, but because of newly revealed manipulations. Raul had essentially sabotaged his own social standing. I didn't rejoice in his downfall, nor did I pity him. Instead, I felt a peculiar sense of poetic justice as the universe seemed to align things without my interference. Daniela and I began a new tradition: Sunday coffee together, where we would discuss everything and nothing. During one of these heart-to-hearts, she posed a profound question. "Dad, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive them?" I pondered for a moment before responding. "I believe there's a distinction between forgiving. She in the process of reconciliation. Perhaps I have already granted them forgiveness. The pain doesn't affect me like it once did, but genuine repentance from both parties is necessary for true reconciliation, which I don't believe is achievable." She nodded in empathy. "I used to feel like there was a void in my life because of that missing family connection, but now I realize I have always been complete." Her words were a priceless gift, affirming that I had raised a resilient daughter capable of discerning real love from mere facades. Life moves forward, old wounds become faded scars that are barely tender to the touch, and occasionally, even the deepest betrayals can lead us back to where we truly belong. Through my 26 years, I've learned that not all wounds need to fully mend, and that's perfectly fine. I once thought forgiveness meant forgetting, returning to trust as if the betrayal had never occurred. Now I comprehend. I've come to understand that genuine forgiveness means releasing oneself from the burden of resentment without feeling obligated to maintain relationships with those who have caused harm. Nobody's family is perfect, including mine. Yet, mine consists of individuals who have shown unwavering loyalty and authentic love. Through my daughter Daniela, I've learned that even amid our most profound disagreements, true love can always find its way back. As for Raul and Karina, life has a way of bringing balance. I didn't need to seek revenge. Their own actions led them to the consequences they deserved. This perhaps is the kind of justice we all hope to witness someday, even if it takes 26 years to materialize. Ultimately, I've realized the immeasurable value of dignity and self-respect. Some individuals are not meant to have a seat at your table, regardless of the familial ties you may share.